Hi guys, welcome to Earth Science. We're going to start with chapter 1. We're going to cover a couple sections today. We're going to cover sections A and B in your book, so just feel free to follow along as I go through this lecture. All right, so first, why Earth Science? Why do we take time to study Earth Science? As Christians, we know that God made the Earth for us, and part of that process of creation is a command for us to take care of the Earth. It's known as the creation mandate. And it was basically given to Adam and Eve to take care of the animals, take care of the earth, and that comes to us as well. In order to take care of it, we should study it, okay? And then use that knowledge that we get from that study to help others. How can we farm better to feed more people? How can we deal with pollution so that the water is useful to everyone? How do we keep our air clean so people aren't getting sick from that pollution? So we're using the knowledge of earth science to actually help others as well. It also helps us to just find out more about God's glory. Creation was pretty incredible, pretty awesome. And as you study the earth and everything about it, it points to that glory. It points to God's his artistry, just his amazing ability to create something so awesome. We can also use the understanding of the world that God created to kind of get us into the Bible and back and forth with that. So in order to understand what we see around us, we need to get into God's word, and that will help us kind of see things as God made them. Okay. Now, this is all based on Christianity, right? Not everyone does this. So we're going to always look at Christianity and earth science together, okay? We're going to use something known as a worldview. Your worldview is the lenses that you look at things with. You take your own experiences into things and your own beliefs and your own values. And it's going to be important for you to keep that in mind as we learn about the Earth. A lot of scientists don't do that. They assume, these presuppositions are assumptions that we believe to be true, even though they're not proven. A lot of scientists assume that the Earth came into being by this thing known as the Big Bang, and they can't really explain it. They're going to use those values and beliefs and lenses to shape their idea of Earth science. We believe that God created the Earth, okay? So we assume that to be true, even though we can't really prove it. And that's going to shape our view of Earth science. We use a lot of religion that mixes with our study of science. The secular world, which is a world without religion, doesn't necessarily mean they don't have beliefs, but they remove those beliefs from whatever it is they're doing. It tends to be a more worldly view. They don't use God in their lenses of looking at things. And then finally, we get to this kind of switching gears a little bit. Models are something used in science a lot to explain something a little more simply based on observations, based on data collected. The models that we look at are created with these worldviews. So the model of the Earth being developed through the Big Bang and this random series of events would be the secular model. Creation would be the Christian model of how the Earth was made, okay? Some more scientific terms as we kind of intro into Earth science. Hypothesis, I'm sure you've heard of that before, especially doing the science fair last year. Hypothesis is your guess or your explanation of a question in nature. So if I look outside and I want to know why a certain tree is growing better than another tree, I'm going to make a guess as to why that is. That's a hypothesis, okay? And then through scientific method, which we'll talk more about later, through testing and observing and collecting data, scientists can come up with a theory or a law. Now, it sounds like a law is much more kind of set in stone than theory. A theory sounds like more like an idea, but they're both just ideas, okay? A theory is an idea just to use to explain why something happens. So for instance, the theory of evolution explains why all the different animals are the way they are and where they came from. It's not proven, though. It does use data collected, but we're going to spend a lot of time kind of refuting that theory and use that same data to fit into our theory of creation, because that's not proven either. A law is just an idea that describes something seen or observed. It's the what. There's not any explanation as to why from it. So for instance, Newton has a law you'll learn about in 8th grade. First law of motion. For that's the third law. First law is an object at rest will stay at rest, and an object in motion will stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. That is stated as a law, but it doesn't explain why it happens. So, basically, if I'm in outer space and I throw a baseball, it's going to keep going on forever. That's supported by that law of motion, but it doesn't explain the why of what's happening, okay? So they're both ideas. They're both seen over and over. They're both tested and observed oftentimes, but just two different terms that you'll see. From that, I just want you to understand that a law isn't necessarily more set in stone than a theory. They're both tested and put through a lot of review, okay? Part of the scientific method is collecting data. All right, data is just the information that you can gather. There's different types of data. We have what's known as descriptive or qualitative data. It describes the quality of something. You just basically use descriptive words for that. And then we have measurable data or quantitative measurements. The quantity of something means numbers. You can measure it. Okay, so if you were going to grow a plant and you were making observations and collecting data on that plant, you would describe the plant. What color is the plant? What shape are the leaves? Things like that. That's descriptive or qualitative data. But then you would also measure the plant, measure the length of the leaves, count the number of leaves, measure the height, things like that. Count how much fruit is produced or flowers or something like that. Anything that involves numbers is known as measurable data or quantitative data, okay? And then you can get data a couple of ways. You can derive it from other information. So you would look at the patterns, okay? Well, when I grew this plant 15 times, the same thing happened. And so I'm going to assume that the next time I'm going to be able to derive that same data. And then you can also make inferences, which is drawing conclusions from the data. And that's also part of the scientific method there, okay? So let's bring it back to earth science here. First of all, what is science? Science is awesome, is what it is. In general, very basically, science is the collection of observations that make models to explain and predict things. So it's all about being curious. It's all about observing what's happening, collecting that data, and then using that data to make an explanation of what we see, okay? Earth science narrows it down a little bit to just kind of making those observations and models surrounding the processes that are occurring on the Earth. So things like earthquakes and volcanoes and the formation of mountains and weather, all the stuff that's happening around us that we can observe needs to be studied. And then you collect data from that, and you can make predictions and you can make models to explain what's happening there. That's earth science, okay? Now we'll study, if you look at this little graph here, you'll see the lithosphere, the biosphere, the cryosphere, the atmosphere, and the hydrosphere. The lithosphere is all the land, okay? We will definitely study that. The biosphere is all the living things that exist within the earth. We'll probably spend more time talking about the biosphere in 7th grade science, but we'll get into it a little bit now. The hydrosphere is all the water on the earth. We won't specifically talk about the cryosphere because that's just all the frozen water. We'll kind of lump that together with the hydrosphere. And then the atmosphere is all the gases around the earth. That's where the weather takes place, and just all the layers of gas around our earth. We'll talk a lot about that as well. But while we do that, we want to make sure that we use our Christian lenses, okay? We're going to use our Christian worldview to take those observations and keep that idea of creation that we learn about in God's word to help us explain those processes. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about the Bible. We're going to talk a lot about what we see around us, but it might be a different explanation than you would get in a normal textbook or a normal secular class as we go along. Okay, all right, that is our first lecture for Earth Science.